Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for our Menopause in the Workplace event with our partners, my Menopause Centre. I'm Anthony. I work for Restless, and I know this partnership is something that we value from our side. Before I hand over to Helen, who will chair this evening's event, I wanted to remind you of a couple of housekeeping points. Please post your questions and thoughts in the chat function at the bottom of our screens. Feel free to post throughout the presentation. There will also be time for questions at the end. This event is recorded and link will be emailed to all registered this evening, along with links to other resources. It will also be made available to view on the Restless events. I'd like to hand over to our panel chair, Helen, who is the co-founder of my Menopause Centre. Helen has held Chief Marketing Officer roles across the healthcare, beauty, broadcast, furniture, and property sectors, and is a self-described women's wellness champion. Over to you, Helen.
Super. Thank you so much, Anthony, and welcome everyone. Well, as you will know from the invitation that we sent to this event, research that was conducted by the Fawcett Society last year for Channel 4 showed that a staggering 10% of women have quit their jobs here in the UK because of their menopause symptoms. And according to the Chartered Institute for Personnel and Development, despite this, only 3 in 10 businesses have said that they're taking action, although we're not really sure what that means. Now, there's a real world consequence to this lack of support. It's estimated that across the UK, around 14 million days are lost every year due to menopause symptoms. And with menopause mainly affecting women in their late 40s and early 50s, or menopause symptoms in particular, too many women are leaving work as they approach or at the peak of their career, not because they want to or because they feel they need to. And if not leaving, then stepping back from promotion or reducing their hours. All of this is exacerbating the pension and the gender pay gap. It's weakening gender diversity in the workplace, and it's doing absolutely nothing to attract and retain talent. And it's no wonder then that menopause has fast become one of the most important and topical issues in the workplace today. We hear from the government about the importance of getting over 50s back into the workplace. It's necessary for the economy. There's a labour force shortage. It's slightly crazy for businesses not to be doing anything to recognise that the impact that symptoms can have on female talent retention and the mental health implications can no longer be underestimated or overlooked, and we must smash the taboos. And that's why I'm delighted that on this evening's panel, we have 3 brilliant women, Dr. Abbie Laing, Deborah Garlick and Madhu Kapoor, joining us for this conversation. So very briefly, Dr. Abbie works with us here in my Menopause Centre. She graduated from the University of Bristol and she holds a Bachelor of Science in Neuroscience. And Abbie has always been drawn to women's health, and I know her well, and she is a brilliant practitioner and an expert in this area. Deborah, I also know very well. We're both based in Nottingham. Deborah is the entrepreneurial and incredible founder and CEO of Menopause in the Workplace and the author of the book Menopause, The Change for the Better. Her Menopause in the Workplace team support employers to achieve menopause-friendly accreditation by their independent panel. She organised the UK's first Menopause in the Workplace conference over 6 years ago. Definitely the first, Deborah, wasn't it? And over the past 7 years, she and her team have supported thousands of employers since, including many of the leading employers recognised for demonstrating best practice across the UK today. Madhu Kapoor, I'm delighted that Madhu is joining us this evening. Madhu is the founder of MS for Menopause. Some of you might recognise Madhu from the interview that she did with us a few months ago. And after reading Madhu's interview and chatted with her, I asked her if she'd like to join us on this evening's panel event, because Madhu can really speak from her own personal experience of how her severe menopause symptoms impacted her in the workplace, and not knowing what to do and sadly not receiving any support, she left her employment abruptly. Based on her own personal experience, she decided to found Menace for Menopause, where she supports employers and women's, and including women's husbands, partners and children through the menopause with simple and accessible advice. Madhu is due to publish her book, Working Through the Menopause, to help people balance their health and their career at the same time. And she'll include a framework that she's developed in that. So I think without further ado, if we kick off the conversation this evening with 3 brilliant women who each bring some very different perspectives to the conversation. So Dr. Abbie, if we start off with a question for you, thinking about all of the patients that you've seen and treated, all of the women that you know and the research you see, what symptoms of menopause are the ones that you think most impact women in the workplace?
It's a really good question, Helen, and it's one that's actually quite tricky to answer because there are so many symptoms of the menopause, and the menopause can present in so many different ways, insidiously. But if I were to try and tease out those that most impact women, so what I see in the clinic back to back, the first one that jumps out at me is brain fog. This one I hear a lot. And sometimes people say, well, what's brain fog? What's brain fog? When I ask about it, it's actually quite difficult to describe, but if I were to try and describe it, it's feeling like you have porridge in your brain, feeling like your brain's full of cotton wool. That feeling, perhaps if you've done a long haul flight and you're on a different time zone and you're trying to think, but not quite being able to make those connections. And it's an umbrella term, really, that describes how cognition is affected by the menopause. And thinking slowly, word salads, word naming difficulties, problems concentrating, lack of mental clarity. These are all symptoms of brain fog, and they affect women hugely in the workplace. I hear all sorts of stories, women sitting back in board meetings, not putting their ideas forward, not taking job promotions, accountants feeling frightened that they're going to put in the wrong numbers and make a big mistake, shopkeepers forgetting their keys, getting to work, forgetting the codes they type in just to open safes, hairdressers stepping back because they feel they can't make that small talk anymore. And it causes overall a huge loss of confidence in women, and it shouldn't do because it is treatable. But you see women shying away from roles that previously they have shone at really, really well. So brain fog is a huge one that affects work, that can be addressed in the menopause. But there's so many, it's hard to just pick brain fog on its own. So other ones that sort of spring to mind, migraines. Some women get chronic migraine in the perimenopause. Migraine is actually a disabling condition as per WHO guidelines. And it doesn't just last for a short period of time for many women, it can last for 24, 48 hours. So if someone's getting them back to back every single day, they can be living with headache symptoms, nausea, vomiting, changes in their vision. And that's disabling, and women can't work like that. So I see women who are signed off sick and on permanent sick leave. I've seen people on warnings from their work because they're not able to function with their migraines. And if I were to pick one more for you, it would be lack of sleep. And people say lack of sleep is a form of torture, and sleep can often go completely off-piste in the perimenopause and the menopause. And this can lead to a huge anxiety with women waking up in the night thinking, I have got to function tomorrow, and spending those early hours wide awake, worrying, especially if they have jobs, for example, that involve driving, such as driving instructors, bus drivers, or operating machinery. It can be very, very frightening to suddenly feel like you're losing your sleep. And I had a lady last week who stopped international travel because she was having meetings abroad and she just couldn't sleep while she was away. Her body was not able to adapt to different time zones. So taken a new job away from international travel, which was something that she was thriving at. So I could talk forever about all the different symptoms, but if I were to summarize, brain fog, poor sleep, migraines probably have the biggest impact on women in the workforce.
Abbie, that's really helpful. And as you said, every woman's experience is different, but they're the key ones. And I've just pasted a link in to the symptom checker on our website that looks at 40 different symptoms, because obviously the question then is, what can I do about my symptoms? So there's lots of free information and advice in there on that. So Madhu, if we come to you then, you're a passionate campaigner for workplace menopause support, driven from a very personal experience of your own. Could you tell us what happened for you, what your experience was, and what you think would have made a real difference to you?
Yes, so I worked with my employer for 23 years, and I worked as a recruitment specialist. I loved what I did. My job was varied. I was committed and thoroughly enjoyed the fact that I just wasn't sitting behind a desk. I was actually going in and out of the office, liaising with different employers, liaising with management, with the advisors, holding workshops, preparing workshops. So it was like, because it was varied, I just loved the fact I was fortunate enough to have a job like that. But having been an independent, confident, hands-on individual in my early 40s when I began to change, and I didn't know what was happening to me. It was just the slow changes initially, and it was just things like my skin changing. I wasn't really a very vain person that looked after my skin anyway, but I just started to notice something changing, my body shape changing. And then it was like Abbie mentioned, that the brain fog, the insomnia, and the insomnia was the bit that really affected me because I was having the night sweats on top of that. And I would be getting up 2 o'clock in the morning, then I would have to get up at 6, but I couldn't go back to sleep once I'd got up at 2 in the morning. I suffered severely with emotional symptoms, with anxiety, low in mood, lacked confidence. And I was doing my same job for years. So nothing really changed in my job role, but it was me that I had changed, but I just didn't know what to do, didn't know who to ask for help. And I actually wanted my manager to come and ask me to, you know, are you okay, if they'd noticed that I had changed or anything like that. Eventually I did go to the GP to seek help, and I didn't really get a diagnosis straight away. It took about a good 2 years. And I did approach my female manager, same age as me. And when I approached her, it took me a lot of courage to do that. And I don't know why. And basically, when I reached out to her, her focus was on targets. And it just sort of took me aback as to getting a response like that. There was no empathy from her or anything. And I think from then on afterwards, I just deteriorated further. So I realized about 6 months later or so that I think I just snapped one evening, woke up the next morning and handed in my resignation. Didn't speak to anyone at home. And I know there's a lot of women out there. You know, I'm married, my husband was working, so I could do that. And I just, in having done that, I thought my health would be better in that way. And I didn't. I just went downhill once I'd actually left work. What I would have wanted was someone like me to sort of come and talk to me, just to check in on me, to see if I was okay, if they'd noticed that I'd actually changed or what was happening with me, just to ask me. And maybe I might have opened up. The other one was for me to actually having the confidence to speak up. But in the job role that I had, I was very confident in what I did. But I don't know if it was because of the background that I was from, and the fact that I was surrounded by women, and not women openly didn't speak about menopause. And it was the same time as Deborah founded her company, which was in 2016. And I just, I think it would be having the confidence to actually speak up. And then I wish there was menopause awareness at work. There was more of that, where support was available for everyone, and there was accessibility of knowing that that was available at work. And hoping that, you know, when I did resign, the fact that I worked for my employer for 23 years, the manager didn't even come up to ask me as to why it is I'm actually resigning, because I was ready to give my answer, but it just showed that they didn't see the skill sets that I had and the knowledge that I had, in the fact that I was leaving. I found that very difficult. And I just think that those are the 4 things I would say that I would have wanted.
Yeah, look, Madhu, thank you so much for you know, sharing your own personal story so honestly. You know, by sharing, you're helping so many other women as well. And it is really sad to hear that was your experience, and you didn't get that support. And you know, you spoke about how you wished you'd had the confidence, but it's hard, isn't it? Because as Abbie mentioned, with the symptoms that so many women have going, on, their confidence is shot. You know, so the last thing that you have is the reserve of energy and confidence to kind of speak about what you're experiencing and the confidence to ask for help.
And it's actually knowing what you were going through, because at that time I didn't know what I was going through. And when I did resign, it was in that month that I got diagnosed as being perimenopause.
Yeah.
It didn't sort of click to me then as to, okay, I'm resigning because I'm going through that. I shouldn't be doing that. But to me, it was, I needed to do that because I needed to cope, because I wasn't coping.
Yeah.
And attending these regular meetings that you attend, and the fact that you can't get your words out. You're sitting in these meetings that you've been attending time and time again, and all of a sudden you're sitting there and you just can't think. You can't even absorb the information that's been said to you. So, you know, we've had, you know, you have the pregnancy sort of, the brain, what's that brain thing called when you're
baby brain?
Yeah, the baby brain. Then I had the menopause brain after that.
Sleep deprivation, yeah. AKA sleep deprivation. So look, there's so many great things that you've called out there, and that Abbie has called out, and it's brilliant that we're having this conversation. And we've had some fantastic comments and questions in the chat, which we are definitely going to come back to. You know, they're so important, and we're going to touch on them. But Deborah, this is a great moment to kind of turn to you now. You know, if you think about what you've heard from Abbie and what you've heard from Madhu, around the time that Madhu was having this really terrible experience, tough experience, you started Handpicked Menopause in the workplace. So Deborah, you know, doing this for 7 years now, having trained, you know, probably people across thousands of organizations in the UK, how much has actually changed in the last 6 to 7 years? And do you think that, you know, the experience that Madhu had in 2016, do you think there are still women who are having that experience today?
Oh, undoubtedly. And it really does sadden me to hear Madhu's story. And also it's very sad for the organisation as well, because how much talent walked out the door that day that they've got to replace. And one of the big themes that we're hearing at the moment is around the Great Resignation and the number of, in fact, I saw an alarming statistic that said 3/4 of employers are signalling that it's going to be really tough for them to recruit all of the people that they want to recruit. So, you know, it really is talent walking out the door. And, you know, it's short-sighted if employers don't start to take action on this now. It's become increasingly more urgent and important, maybe even so before COVID. And when we started out in 2016, things have changed. Helen, you know that when we started talking to the Government Equality Office team who wrote the report, we couldn't find a menopause policy in the land. They just didn't exist. In 2018, 2019, the CIPD published information that said 1 in 2 employers are taking action. And last year on World Menopause Day, they said 3 in 10 employers are taking action. But, you know, we don't know what taking action means. And we know that there are now getting on for 50 employers who've achieved menopause-friendly accreditation, who we know have been assessed on what difference they've made in the workplace, what difference they've made to hearts and mind, creating a safe space and enabling people to speak up about menopause if it's getting in the way for them at work. And putting the training in place as well, because, you know, line managers aren't given any more menopause knowledge than we have. You know, it's a cultural issue, this, that we're trying to change. So a lot's changed. You know, does a week go by without celebrity talking about it? I know Oprah in the US is talking about it on her show, coming up very, very soon. And we saw Drew Barrymore talking about, actually, I think the headlines were Drew Barrymore makes hot flushes cool. Well, you know, I suppose Hollywood's a different lifestyle for us. But, you know, more and more people are talking about it. So it's starting to break down the barriers. But we're still a long way to go. And, you know, I see some of the comments coming up in chat, particularly in response to Dr. Abbie's, you know, what are the symptoms that women experience and affect them most in the workplace? And you hear about brain fog. Hot flushes are in there, but they're not always top. Anxiety, sleeplessness, fatigue, and you can hear those and you can understand how it affects somebody's confidence. So with Madhu's, for Madhu, you know, how when your confidence has been chipped away, do you get that courage and go and talk to your line manager? And in Madhu's case, have had no experience of this whatsoever. You know, it's a perfect storm, isn't it? But one of the things that, you know, we are, and you did mention the Menopause Friendly Employer Awards, who'd have thought we could pack a room with so many people celebrating the great things that our employers are doing. So it's still, in my opinion, the thin end of the wedge. And even in those employers that are taking action, you're still going to find the line managers or the individuals who are still either not engaged in this, or in Madhu's case, focusing on their performance, and really short-sighted performance for now, not realizing the performance for the future is going to be affected if talent walks out. So we've still a long way to go.
Yeah, and it definitely, Deborah, despite all the brilliant work that you and some others are doing, and we can see it come through in the chat here. And as I said, we're going to come to those comments in a moment and questions. But before we do, I'd like to turn our attention to now. So we've got a really good sense of it's, you know, we've made progress and there's still a way to go. We're still at the foothills. And before I come to ask you about the things that organizations can do to support women going through the workplace, Abbie, there's a theme running through here in terms of, so what can I do about my symptoms now? And that isn't the purpose of tonight's webinar. And I've put in some links here to help people. But if you could just say in a couple of minutes, your advice, top tips for women as they think about solutions to managing their symptoms and to taking control so that they can start rebuilding their confidence as well. So how do you build that foundation?
The first thing is to recognize the symptoms. Once you've done that, you've done half the job, because often people don't realize, gosh, this could be a perimenopausal symptom or a menopausal symptom. You know, like Madhu said, I've had some people who've lost their jobs and looked back and gone, actually, that was my hormones. Once you've identified those, there are so many ways you can treat them, and they range from one end of the scale to lifestyle changes, which have a huge impact on symptoms, all the way at the other end of the scale to HRT. On that scale, HRT is the gold standard. It is the most effective treatment for menopausal symptoms, but I do have some people who can't take HRT and they do very, very well with non-hormonal alternatives. So your lifestyle adjustments, things like mental health input, non-hormonal medications. And so large scale of treatments, with HRT being at one end, with HRT being the most effective and the gold standard treatment for women.
Brilliant, thank you, Madhu. And I've added a link in there in our menopause questionnaire, or Abbie, which helps people understand if and where you are. And there's loads of free information on the website on ways to manage menopause symptoms. And as I say, Abbie, we can look at doing another webinar to talk about that specifically. But Abbie is a brilliant expert in this area. So if the first step is to understanding yourself and understanding your body, understanding what's going on, empowering yourself with knowledge and getting help to manage your symptoms, if we turn then our focus to the workplace, so what are the key things that organizations can do to support people going through menopause in the workplace? Deborah, if we start with you, you said, you've mentioned there are 50 organizations now that have been accredited, you're seeing best practice. What's the best practice that you're seeing that really makes the difference?
Well, I'll start with policies because I mentioned policies earlier, but policies are only a part of it, really, aren't they? Because, you know, policies are document. You know, if it's sitting in a filing cabinet and everybody's not using it, it's not really going to change anything else. However, a policy or guidance document, many organizations don't call them policies, it demonstrates that the organization is taking this seriously. And I often think of the individual who's struggling with symptoms, if they identify that they're symptoms, or the line manager that gets a meeting in their diary, if they can go to the intranet, type in menopause, and there's a document there that says, this is something that's important to us. these are some of the common symptoms. This is where you can get help in our organisation. It does give you that confidence. So maybe you can print that off and take it to your meeting, or have a read through it and understand that, you know, that this is how the organisation supports me. But bringing it to life is a different matter. Because, you know, we look in terms of best practice, that it's regularly communicated, that it's easily accessible, because somebody's always going to be on holiday, or somebody's always going to be coming to menopause at a different time, aren't they? You know, we're not all there yet, and somebody might have scrolled past it and missed it. Because, you know, that says menopause, that's nothing to do with me. So communicate that regularly, but bring it to life with the conversations. And there's some comments in chat around how difficult it can be to talk about menopause. You know, if nobody's talking about it around you, you're going to be the first person that says, does anybody want to talk about menopause? That takes some courage. So creating that environment where it's comfortable, where it feels safe, where you don't think you're going to say the word menopause and everybody's going to judge you for it, or think it's a little bit, you know, embarrassed about it. So the more you talk about it, the more you get your comms and your engagement, and whether you hold events, recognise World Menopause Day, at least 3 times a year, you need to be talking about it, because we are still chipping away at a taboo subject. And so, yeah, and the more you talk about it, the easier it gets. And we often say, when you start talking about it, you might be surprised who joins in. And as Abbie and Madhu said earlier, you know, this is about awareness and education. Madhu didn't know she was coming up to perimenopause. We've seen that in the chat. And people didn't know those symptoms they were experiencing was the menopause. But you know what? When you start to engage people, you might sort of recognise, actually, I've got that and I've got that. I wonder if it could be. Or your occupational health teams having it in the back of the mind when they can't put the finger on, why is this person been referred to me? I don't recognise these symptoms. Or line managers, upskilling all of these people. Line managers can feel very worried when they come to menopause sessions, because they think that you know, they might need to know about HRT, or what if somebody asks me about this, or what if somebody asks me about that, and they can feel really anxious about talking about menopause. But actually the training is very reassuring for them. It's not their job to be Dr. Abbie Laing. It's not their job at all. You know, I'd be horrified to think a line manager might say, have you thought about HRT? That's the doctor or the healthcare professional's role. But when they understand their role is there to be empathetic, to understand, to appreciate this could be how it's affecting somebody at work. And importantly, understanding what workplace adjustments would help. What can you do to support that individual? So lots of the policies, written guidance, training, awareness. But I think the one that people often might get a little bit confused about is actually what's happening in the workplace. You know, do people wear uniforms? Do they have access to cool drinking water? Is what in the environment in this particular workplace, and every workplace is unique, is getting in the way of you being at your best? Or what can we do to help? And as you know, Helen, when organizations ask that and demonstrate that they're prepared to do the things that their employees are asking for, it makes a huge difference. So every employer is different, but those key areas of focus can shift a workplace very, very dramatically.
Indeed, and all, you know, really great practical suggestions and advice there, Deborah, and the importance of creating a safe psychological safety to have the conversation. And then Madhu, as you know, as you step back and reflect on your experience, and as you think about, you know, what you've learned in your advice now, if you're to say what is if you were standing in the shoes of the business, you know, how would you articulate what's the business benefit to an organization of being menopause friendly?
The business benefits, I would say, it actually improves the well-being of your employees and the productivity as to how they then start performing. If there's support within the organization, basically everything that Deborah said, it's actually, it just eases it for that individual that's going to go through all the changes that they are going to go through. You know, if they provide support, provide the resources, it actually just helps to manage that for that individual. They can manage their symptoms if they have that support at work. Also, the benefits of ensuring that the employers know their employees and their background, and actually understand the fact that if they know that menopause is not one size that fits all, and we all know that everyone has a different journey. And I think when I was going through what I was going through, I just saw myself as a woman. I didn't see myself as an Asian woman from a traditional family, married into even a more traditional family, who wouldn't speak openly about anything or everything. And I think it's very important that the business benefits is to actually increase diversity and inclusion. That's very important for them to get to know their employees, what type of workforce they have, are those guidances supporting those employees, and making sure that you don't have one standard policy. You actually tailor those needs to your employees, and then provide the adjustments that they might need, accordingly. And it will actually help with performance, help the employer in not losing their staff, retaining their employees, and it would reduce absenteeism. And also, in the short term, if they are supporting their employees, they might be, they might do reduced working hours for a temporary basis, but in the long term, it's going to benefit that employer, and they're not going to lose their employees then. And it's actually having retention of those loyal, committed women that are there to work and actually, thrive on it. And the skills that they can offer, if they have to train someone else, they're not going to have the skills that that individual actually had for that employer.
Yeah, so look, lots of great points there in terms of the economic impact and benefit to an organization of retaining people with those skills, the cost to recruit somebody to train them in, the reduction in sick levels, the increase in engagement as well. So there's a whole range of and there's a growing evidence base now, isn't there, as well, to support people as they build the business case for investment and training in support, for the workplace adjustments. And I think one of the comments one of the comments that's made here, I think that's really important. I think it touches on a point that you and Deborah made as well, is the particularly for line managers, and when we go beyond policy, the importance of listening. And I think listening with empathy and compassion, because as you said, Deborah, you're not there to be a doctor to provide medical advice, but it's about really understanding what's going on for the person in your team, and then working with them. So that listening is an incredibly powerful tool, isn't it? And to co-create the workplace adjustments or the policies with the people, with the women in your organization who are going through menopause. So not doing it to them, but it's that co-creation. I think that's what you've seen, Deborah, isn't it? When you have, the formal and the informal really helps.
It does, but the best practice is not about downloading a menopause policy from the internet and filling in the blanks. That never works because it doesn't reflect your organisation. What works best from experience is when people are engaged in the solution and are listening and saying, what can we do to help? And that's all built into it as well. Time and time again, we see some of the things that employers have done, which they've actually said, we wouldn't have thought of doing this. But when we asked our colleagues, it wasn't the usual things like, do you need a desk fan or things like that? It was some things like actually a bit more flexibility around this would work, certain working conditions. It was things they weren't expecting. And very, very often, because when you talk about reasonable adjustments, and you're right, Madhu, they're very often cheap to do. Or don't cost any money at all. It is that listening and changing some of the things. Somebody's put out what's your reasonable adjustment for brain fog. Well, actually, I know one of those was an individual was saying, don't talk to me in the car or give me actions to do in the corridor. I forgot by the time I get back to my desk. Can we have more structured meetings where I've got my notepad? And we've all got notepads with us tonight. I bet we could show them. But it's kind of, yeah, there we go. We've all got notepads. just in case. Yeah, there you go. So, you know, that sort of changing to that work, and that particular line manager had no idea what was going on, but actually as soon as they said, well, actually that's absolutely fine. So reasonable adjustments are usually small things over a short period of time, but you know what, make the world of difference to the individual that's struggling. And for so many of us, just being able to know that somebody's listening and that cares and that it's not sort of judging you, that's enough. That's as much. If you can just go, I'm having a day, just bear with me, it'll pass, and know that somebody's not going to go, oh gosh, here you go again. Or roll eyes or anything else like that. That is a lovely place to be. That's a supportive environment.
That makes such a difference. Just having that conversation, or, you know, knowing that someone is there. But as you said earlier, it's like the employers wanting to, you know, the managers, I think, are frightened of the word menopause, because as you said, they think that they have to be medical professionals, which they don't. They just need that awareness and understanding of what they can do to support their employees.
Yeah. And somebody's asked about legal implications as well, Helen. So we're talking about the lovely benefits that employers can get from their workplace, you know, the inclusive culture, the less time off, etc., etc. They're all the, let's call those the carrot. There is a stick as well, because as we've all increased in our awareness, the number of tribunals where menopause, as mentioned, is going up and up and up, and more people. Menopause is covered by the Equality Act 2010. It's not a protected characteristic on its own, but it's age, sex, and even disability discrimination. And employers have a responsibility under the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 as well. So, you know, whilst the tribunals aren't massive numbers yet, there is certainly a worrying trend. But ideally, we don't want to get to a point where people are going to tribunals. We want the employers to work it out in partnership with their colleagues and hopefully thrive in the workplace.
And I think, Deborah, that is one of the things that's coming through, is that, you know, as we discussed at the top, there's still too many women who aren't having a great experience. There are some comments on here from people who are benefiting from conversations at work, helping them to realize that their symptoms are linked to perimenopause, but others who aren't, and it becomes quite crunchy when it comes to performance reviews. And people, I know you're looking at the comments, are seen to not being performance. So you've mentioned, you know, some of the legal protections, you know, that are available, and so just to any other advice, Deborah, for women who find themselves in a very difficult position where they feel that they're being unfairly treated or discriminated against because of their menopause symptoms?
Well, you might not have an understanding line manager, but you might have other things. So I mentioned about searching on your policy and seeing what the guidelines are there, because that's always hopeful, isn't it? If you can find that there's things on your intranet that says, actually, there are people, maybe you've even got a support group going in your organisation, or individuals that have talked about it in your organisation. So if you can't talk to your line manager, is there somebody else that you can talk to? It might be a colleague that you trust. It might be that you can go and talk to HR about it. You may well have the option in your organisation to self-refer to occupational health. Some organisations, you have to go through your line managers, others don't. But, you know, don't, you know, sorry, Madhu, but you know, we don't want people just walking out or handing in the notice. And, you know, I kind of, my head went a bit fuzzy when you said you weren't even asked after you'd done that, after all of those years. You know, it is your job, and or work affects menopause and menopause affects work. We get a lot more than just money, as you might have found, Madhu. It's the purpose, the people around you and everything. So do follow other channels in your organisation rather than just have one of those days where you just go in and hand a letter. And if you still don't get any joy from that, you know, you can escalate that up. I know somebody was saying earlier they've been through a grievance process. Even if you were going to a tribunal, you have to exhaust your internal processes anyway before you get to there. But don't give up. You know, one of the things, sometimes it takes a bit of bravery to be the first person that says menopause in your organisation, but it's worth it. You know,
Yeah.
our experiences, you'd be surprised who joins in. You really will. And maybe you could even start your own support group in your organisation.
It's amazing how that would actually make that person feel if they do start something like that.
Yeah.
Changes that they can actually see and impact the company or the their team even. I would, if I had been, I think, where I was working, I know I would have done something there if it was at that time, but it didn't happen. But I just do think that if that's what I say to women, if you actually can start something yourself, you'll just realize the difference that can actually make on other individuals that haven't got support.
I met a line manager last week who set up a Teams support group for menopausal symptoms, and you could join it anonymously if you wanted to, or you could join it with your name, and there were set times you could have a meeting, or you could say ask for top tips. And this was a line manager who was extremely passionate about opening up the discussion, talking about it, making it normal in the work environment, and making sure women felt they could come forward, and if they were frightened, having that anonymity protection if they wanted to, but also not having to have that if they didn't want to. And so normalizing the menopause and making sure people are talking about it like they would be talking about other things normally. I thought that was absolutely amazing, and she was really proud of her role. She was really passionate about her role, and so I think it would be amazing if there were more companies that had line managers who it was really passionate for them to change this in the work environment so that women can thrive going forward. I think possibly one of the most important qualities of a line manager is compassion and empathy, understanding that this person is struggling with symptoms and that you can help them. And that's an incredibly rewarding role to have, to be able to help that person. And I think that having a line manager who meets those qualities, and we're seeing more and more of them now, it can really change women's lives in the workplace.
It's more that servant leadership, isn't it, in terms of approach to leading teams. Now, unbelievably, we're down to our last 5 minutes or so. I'm just going to quickly run through some of the points and the feedback, and thank you all for the questions that are coming through to put them out there. A great comment here from Jackie around the gap between the leadership level of an organization and operational regarding menopause support. It can be it can be huge. So very quickly, Deborah, Madhu, any kind of thoughts on how we can press for more inclusion of the lived experience? It is that bottom up point, isn't it? And that inclusion and co-creation. Any quick thoughts on that?
What I've realized is that, because there's not a lot of clinical trials to do with ethnic minority backgrounds, I think that a lot of employers, managers might think that people from Black or Asian backgrounds don't go through the menopause, or even Chinese backgrounds, that they don't go through the menopause. And what I think is that they need to realize that do not have that assumption. You need to make sure that you're having you're getting to know your employees, what backgrounds they're from. And as we were talking about, it's sort of not to compare women with other women. It's actually looking at getting to know your employees. What I mean by that is sort of, they're females, what their age is, their background, what environment they could be coming from in a home environment. So if it's an Asian woman, they could be living with their mother-in-law or with a big family, and that mother-in-law may have gone through the menopause but probably thinks that, well, I went through it, so you just have to get through it, and not have that support at home, which could actually impact her at work as well. And whereas when you've got estrogen in your body, you're actually more able to cope and put that aside and then just carry on. But when the estrogen's coming out of your body, you're basically taking everything with you, where your mental health's affected at work and everything like that. So I think that intersectionality is very important for the employer to bring into the organization, and making sure that diversity and inclusion is thought about very carefully where they're thinking about their employees and the type they actually have there.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you, Madhu. That is a really important point. Everyone's experience of menopause is different, and the cultural overlay is really important as well in terms of how it shapes the experience, and really understanding what that means in the workplace then, in terms of how you meet people where they're at to bring them with you. So just looking through, there's a lot of themes in here, Deborah, around having a menopause policy, but not having line managers who are kind of living the policy or bringing the policy to life. So it is more tick box, dare I say, at least by some. Any thoughts about that?
Line manager training goes down a treat. And actually, I did mention the employment law earlier, and I know that in an hour's training, we can take line managers, because they can be quite fearful. And you know what? They've got lots of other content areas to cover as well. So I'm definitely not line manager bashing, but you know, you could take them from not knowing enough about menopause. We usually ask them, what do you know about menopause, and how confident do you feel to talk about it? And it's, I don't know what I don't know, and no, I don't feel confident talking about it, to feeling confident and understanding the role that they have to, that they are there to play. I love that about empathetic line managers. We love them, don't we? They're the ones we stick to and stay with. But whenever we're doing that training, when line managers do appreciate they have a personal responsibility under the Equality Act and can be fined as alongside the line manager, that is the stick bit. But I liked what you were saying, Abbie, about encouraging line managers to go along to the training and to get involved. Because if we all treat each other like human beings, and as you said, Helen, meet people where they are, then, regardless of whether it's them experiencing the menopause or they're affected by it because it's somebody at home, a colleague, a friend, family member, this is a completely inclusive subject. And, I probably want to sort of talk to everybody about menopause.
And line manager training, I think, is so important because you are not alone. And, it's incredible that menopause has been and still is a taboo subject, because if you look around your office or wherever you're working, there will be people in that room who are affected by the menopause or perimenopause, and there won't be just one. There will be many of them going through journeys where they are affected by it, either themselves or through loved ones that they know. And so it's hugely important that we raise awareness and develop a compassion and empathy towards this subject. And the enthusiasm will breed enthusiasm. I've seen it when people talking about it. I've seen it when you have a positive line manager who wants to embrace this subject. Then you just see it's like this positive feedback reaction, and you have menopause cafes and menopause support groups, and people are talking about it and people feel positive about it. And it has this dominoes effect on everybody. Everybody is better because of raising awareness on this. So to breed enthusiasm into a line manager has a huge effect on all of the workforce, not just a few people, huge numbers.
This is a life skill, isn't it? We're talking in the workplace, but this is a life skill, because you might not know that you need this information, but I love to see how many people we get on sessions, and we sort of ask them what stage they're at. And one of the options is, I'm here to support someone else. And that number is going up and up and up as a trend. So I'm here to support my partner. I'm here to support my mum. I just wanted to know more about this. And actually, the more inclusive we make this conversation, the better it is for all. We want to be in a situation where people go, of course, I know all about the menopause. Symptoms? No, I didn't struggle. I knew what to expect and I knew what to do.
Exactly.
I think that is the end game we're all shooting for here, isn't it? Whether it's at work or it's at home.
It is, because, sorry, go ahead, Abbie, and then we'll start to wrap.
Just going to say that's men and women. It can feel, I have to take my hat off to men, it can feel quite daunting if you're a male line manager and you're inexperienced with the menopause. It can feel hard for that male line manager. They can feel a bit out of their comfort zone. And I've had men tell me this is how they feel. And I've had men say, can you do male only workshops? Because I feel frightened. There's 90% women, I'm in that small 10% men. Can we have sessions where I feel comfortable saying how much I don't know in my own safe space, so I can learn about it? So we need to embrace inclusivity to everybody on this subject. And I dream of a day where, like you say, it's normal. It's as normal as eating a hot cross bun at Easter. It's normal to talk about the menopause.
That would be one great day.
We'll get
Indeed.
there.
We'll get there. We'll get there. Thanks to the brilliant work that you're all doing. We are definitely going to get there. So just, I'll go around very quickly. Abbie, starting with you, top 2 to 3 tips for women in the workplace.
Yes, you're not alone. If you just open your eyes, you will see it in front of you. Everybody else is on a similar journey. Don't be frightened. Pick up on your symptoms, pick up on your intuition. You know your body. There is help out there. And if you feel that the first hurdle is knocked down, then there will be somebody else who can help you. So don't let it affect your confidence. We can make you feel better.
Super. Thank you, Abbie. Madhu?
I would say communicate and do not suffer in silence. Advocate for yourself. Do not shy away from letting your manager know or your colleagues know what you're actually going through. And if you are going for a doctor's appointment, for a woman's appointment, let them know what you're going through it. And that will start normalizing a conversation at work.
Oh, really practical advice, Madhu. Thank you. And Deborah?
I think they've said it all, Helen. I think I'd probably just end on saying we've all got a part to play in that future we want to create. So what will you do after this session? Because, the more of us that do this, the better it is for us all.
Fantastic. So you've heard it from all of our panelists. Knowledge really is empowering. Understand what's going on. That will also give you confidence to talk about what's going on. And as Deborah's saying, really be the change you want to see. It can be really tough, but ask for help. Empower yourself with knowledge and ask for help. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us this evening. We hope you enjoyed it. And now back to Anthony to close the session.
Right, thank you so much, Helen. Just from a personal note, I found that unbelievably informative. So thank you. That really was fantastic. So thank you so much to everyone who joined tonight. Firstly, thank you to Helen. Thank you to the other panelists, and most of all, thank you so much to everyone who joined tonight. Just a quick reminder that this event was recorded, and a link will be emailed to all those who registered this evening, and it will also be available to view on the Restless events. And again, thank you so much to everyone again, and enjoy the rest of your evenings.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night, everyone. Hope you have a lovely Easter.
And you, Helen.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.